Guys, my name is Catherine and welcome to my channel, The Words of Catherine. Today we'll be doing a wrap-up video for the months of January, February and March because I did not do a wrap-up video in any of those months or when any of those months ended. So I thought, why not just make a big collision video in which I tell you which book I read in January, February and March. So let's go! In January I read seven books to be precise, and those books are... The first book in January that I read was Je zegt het by Connie Palmen, and it was a book which I had to read for my Dutch class, and I ended up not liking it as much as I thought I would because I felt very disconnected from the story and somehow I couldn't really live up with the idea of the author which she had while writing it from the perspective of Ted Hughes, because I found that she wasn't really qualified to write about him and I couldn't really see it as a story. Even though it was listed as fiction, it felt too real while it shouldn't have been real because we cannot know if this was how Ted Hughes felt at the moment in the book. It was very beautifully written, but I felt very disconnected from it, so I think I give it 3 stars out of 5 on Goodreads, and that was the first book I read in January. The second book I read in January was This Savage Song by Victoria Schwab, and I really liked this book. It was completely different than I expected it to be. It was more like this dystopian sort of novel, while I expected it to be something set in a classic world with classic people like 18th century, 17th century, and it was totally not. And this surprise really had taken me aback, but it was such a great book. It was the first book I ever read by Victoria Schwab. It was great. She's an amazing author. And I give it 4 out of 5 stars on Goodreads, and I cannot wait to dive into our dark duet. The next book I read in January was The Spiderwick Chronicles, a notebook for fantastical observations. I've been a huge Spiderwick fan ever since I first played the video game, then read the books and watched the movies, and I have almost all the books in my bookshelf and I love them, and I love Holly Black and Tony DiTerlisi as authors, and even though this was a fill-in book, I just read through the things you had got to do and stuff, and I really liked this book, but not as much as I liked the initial series, so I give this 3 out of 5 stars on Goodreads, and this is just a little whimsical read which you could just fill in, but I don't really like the feel of writing in books, even though this is a do book. But I really love it, and it is gorgeously drawn in and gorgeously written. So yeah, this is the next book I read in January. The next book I read in January was Kindred Spirits by Rainbow Rowell, and this is my first Rainbow Rowell book I've ever read. I liked it. It was a very short read, not too big of a plot, not too heavy. It was a very light read, a very quick read, like about, how many pages was it even? 62 or something. And it's actually very accurate, 62 pages, and I gave it like 3 out of 5. 3.5 out of 5 stars, and I liked it, but I really want to read more of Rainbow Rowell, such as Fangirl and Carry On and all the other books that are really praised out there in the book world. But yeah, I read Kindred Spirits as a 4th book in January. The next book I read in January was Library of Souls by Ransom Riggs, the conclusion book in the Miss Peregrine series, even though there are more Miss Peregrine books to come out, and I'm really excited for that. This book was, in my opinion, the least of the series, like the 3 books, even though it was highly anticipated, but it was still so gorgeously written, and Ransom Riggs really knows how to set a story, but for me it didn't really live up to the 1st and 2nd book, which I devoured and was like cliff hung on every end, and this, I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. I really liked it, but somehow Jacob irritated me in this book, and he didn't irritate me in the 1st and 2nd book. Even though I read those books like 4 years ago, so maybe it's just me growing up, but I don't know, I should read the whole series again. But I really love Ransom Riggs' writing style, and he will always, if he brings out new books, I will always read them because he is just a generally amazing author, and this is the 5th book I read in January. The next book was a freebie book I found on iBooks, and it is The Girl in the Converse Shoes. I did not like this book at all. I think I even gave it 1 or 2 stars. It was just like a very short read, and I had this on in my iBooks library for so long. I was like, why not read it? It's like, how many pages? 10, and I read it. I did not really like it. It was a cute little story, but I didn't really end up liking it. So this is the 6th book I read in January, I think, and yeah, The Girl in the Converse Shoes by Yaritza Garcia. The last book I read in January was The Magician's Nephew by C.S. Lewis, the first book in the Narnia series in the chronological order, because I'm reading it in the chronological order. And I really liked this book. It was so cool to see where the wardrobe came from. Like, this is all explained in this book. I gave it 3/3.5 stars out of 5. I really did like it. I immediately switched on to The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe when I had the time. And soon I'll be switching on to the third book. I really liked this book. This was my last read of January, and I really like Narnia because it's such a great story and really well built, and love it. That brings us to the month of February. In February I only read 2 books because I did not have as much time to read as I did in January with Christmas vacation, etc. But I did read 2 books, and the first book of those was The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe by C.S. Lewis. It is the second book in the chronological order of the Narnia series, and I really liked this book. I gave it 4 stars out of 5 on Goodreads because I really liked it. I really liked the Narnia series. I really liked the movie. I really got the feeling to watch the movie again because the story is just so great, so well written, so well built. C.S. Lewis is such an amazing author, and this was the first book I read in February. The second book I read in February and the last was The Curious Case of Benjamin Button by F. Scott Fitzgerald. I am a huge fan of the movie, and I was always wondering, is there a book of the movie? And apparently there is, and it is a very short book, and I was really surprised with what they did with the movie, and the movie is just fantastic. But the book is so different, and I see them as 2 wholly different stories because it's the same but also very different, and I really like this book. And I gave it 4 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. Yeah, and that was the last book I read in February. So now we've come to the month of March. March was a fairly better month than February, and I read 4 books this month because I don't know how I found time to do it, but somehow I did. And the first book I read was another book for my Dutch class, which was The Easter Parade by Richard Yates. This was a book that was so emotionally driven and loaded, and I really loved it. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars on Goodreads, and if you are thinking of reading it, this is your cue to actually do it because it's a lovely book and I really liked it. The second book I read in March was the first part of the Mouse books. I gave this book 3 out of 5 stars in Goodreads. It was lovely drawn, it was a great story, but I am not that much of a graphic novel person, even though I enjoy reading them, but I'm more of a full-on novel person. So yeah, I really like this book, and yeah. Then I continued on in March with the second part of the Mouse books, and I read these books for my English class. And my opinion is the same as the first book, 3 out of 5 stars on Goodreads, because I'm not that much of a graphic novel person, even though I enjoy reading them. So a solid 3 out of 5 stars on Goodreads for Mouse 2 and 1 also. The last book I read in March is a book that I really liked, but I gave it 3/3.5 stars out of 5 because it was such a strange book, so well written but also so very strange, and that book is Slaughterhouse-5 by Kurt Vonnegut. He is such a strange writer but such an amazing one, and I really want to read more books by him because he has such a satire way of writing and he is just so strange. I would really drink a cup of tea with a man, but yeah, it was a good book and somehow strange with sad humor, and yeah, I like this book. So you guys, that was my wrap up for January, February and March. I hope you enjoyed this wrap up. I really liked the books I read. I have currently read 16 books out of my 50 goal in 2018, and I hope I can actually manage it this year and win my goal. And yeah, I hope you liked this video. I hope you might subscribe, leave a comment, talk to me about books, and I will see you in my next video. So long, farewell, auf Wiedersehen, adieu.